Every single year, one decision in a draft room changes the entire course of NBA history. A team picks the wrong player, passes on a future legend, or trades away a pick that turns into a superstar, and suddenly decades of basketball are rewritten. Some of these mistakes are so massive that they still get talked about today, decades later, because they didn't just cost a franchise a player, they cost them championships, fan bases, and sometimes their entire identity. Today, we're diving into the biggest draft mistakes that changed the NBA forever. Welcome back to HoopNexis, the channel where we break down the stories, the legends, and the moments that shaped basketball into what it is today. If you love deep dives into NBA history, this is exactly the kind of content we live for, so make sure you're subscribed because we've got a lot more of these coming. Let's get into it. Let's start with one of the most painful examples in league history. The Portland Trail Blazers passing on Michael Jordan in 1984. People love to simplify this story by saying Portland just didn't see his talent. But the truth is more complicated. Portland already had a strong backcourt, and they desperately needed a center. So when Hakeem Olajuwon went first overall, it made sense for them to grab Sam Bowie, a talented big man who unfortunately battled injuries throughout his career. Jordan going third overall to Chicago turned into arguably the greatest basketball decision by default in league history. Not because Chicago outsmarted everyone, but because Portland's roster needs pushed Jordan right into their laps. The result was 6 championships, countless MVPs, and a global icon that redefined the sport, while Portland spent years being remembered as the team that picked bones over greatness. Next, we have the Sam Bowie situation blending directly into another classic mistake. But let's shift to a different era, the 2007 draft, when Portland, once again, found themselves at the center of a massive decision. This time it was Greg Oden over Kevin Durant. On paper, Oden looked like a generational big man, a dominant defensive anchor with size that scouts drooled over. But injuries destroyed his career before it ever truly began, while Durant developed into one of the most skilled scorers the league has ever seen. Multiple scoring titles, MVP awards, championships, and a legacy that continues to grow. Portland's front office wasn't foolish for picking Oden. The risk seemed justified at the time, but this pick became one of the most heartbreaking what-ifs in modern NBA history. Now let's talk about a mistake that wasn't about talent evaluation, but about a franchise underestimating potential entirely: the Boston Celtics selecting Len Bias in 1986. Bias was supposed to be the heir apparent to Larry Bird, a generational scorer with athleticism that scouts compared to a young superstar in the making. Tragically, Bias passed away due to a cocaine overdose just 2 days after being drafted, a moment that sent shockwaves through the entire league. While this wasn't a scouting mistake, it represents one of the most devastating what-ifs in NBA history because Boston's championship window may have extended for years had Bias lived to fulfill his potential. Let's shift toward more modern draft blunders, starting with the 2013 draft class, one of the most infamous in league history. Anthony Bennett being selected first overall by the Cleveland Cavaliers remains one of the most talked about mistakes in recent memory. Bennett struggled to find consistency in the league and never lived up to the expectations of a first overall pick, while players like Giannis Antetokounmpo, who went 15th in that same draft, developed into an MVP, a champion, and one of the most dominant players of this generation. This draft is often used as a lesson in scouting, proving that measurable talent on paper doesn't always translate to NBA success. Speaking of overlooked gems, we have to mention the Utah Jazz drafting John Stockton in 1984, a pick that many overlooked at the time but turned into one of the greatest steals in draft history. While not a mistake by Utah, it highlights how other teams missed evaluating a player who would go on to become the all-time leader in assists and steals. Sometimes the biggest draft mistakes aren't about picking the wrong player, they're about the players teams failed to see the potential in altogether. Now let's talk about trades tied to draft mistakes, because sometimes the error isn't in the draft room itself, but in trading away picks that turn into legends. The New York Knicks have one of the most infamous histories here, especially with decisions made around the early 2000s when multiple draft picks were traded away for aging veterans or role players, while those same picks turned into future all-stars for other franchises. This pattern repeated itself so often that Knicks fans still bring it up as one of the biggest reasons the franchise struggled for over a decade. Another significant mistake in league history revolves around the Minnesota Timberwolves drafting Ricky Rubio while passing on other opportunities to build a stronger young core, a decision that combined with mismanagement ultimately delayed the franchise's growth for years. While Rubio had a solid career, the timing and asset management around that era reflected larger organizational issues that affected draft strategy for a long time. At the end of the day, these draft mistakes weren't just simple errors, they were turning points that shaped entire dynasties, rivalries, and legacies. A single decision in a draft room can alter a franchise for over a decade, sometimes even changing the course of NBA history entirely. Whether it's injuries, unforeseen circumstances, poor scouting, or roster mismanagement, these moments remind us how unpredictable and fragile basketball greatness really is. That's it for today's deep dive into the biggest draft mistakes that changed the NBA forever. If you enjoyed breaking down these historic decisions with us, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. This has been HoopNexis, and we'll see you in the next one.